Hi everyone. All right, for us to get the concept of programming, let's look at some definitions, then build the foundation, then we can fly from there. Okay, so I have a definition here. A computer is a general purpose device that can be programmed to carry out a set of arithmetic and logical operations. Take note of this word, a general purpose device. Okay, that can be programmed. It can be given instruction. Programming is all about instructing the processor to do or carry out or follow a specific instructions that will enable the computer to, or enable the user rather, to accomplish a specific task. Okay, then I have another definition here. A computer is an electronic device that executes certain actions through user-based command. This second definition is quite wide, because what it's simply telling you is that any electronic device that can execute a command or carry out certain actions through the user's command, that could be likened to a computer. That's what the second definition is. So if we look at it critically, I would not want to delve into that anyway. But if we look at it critically, we discover that almost every electronic device that receives command from the user and at the end of the day gives or behaves a certain way according to the command the user gives to that electronic device could be likened to a computer. That's what the second definition is all about. Okay, so I have here, it is made up of two parts. Okay, the computer is made up of two parts: the hardware aspect and the software aspect. I'm building a foundation. We are going to programming. So I'm building the foundation. Programming, without the computer there will be no programming. So I'm building a foundation. So the hardware part of the computer, it's the parts that what we can see, we can touch as well. Okay, I have here computers walk through an interaction of hardware and software. Hardware refers to the part of a computer that we can see, touch, including the case and everything inside of it. Okay, so every part of the computer that you can touch and you can see, it's referred to the hardware. Okay, now I said here also the most important piece of hardware is a tiny rectangular chip inside your computer called the central processing unit, or the microprocessor. It is the brain of your computer. Now look at this part, the part that translates what instructions. And you remember that the first definition says a computer is a general purpose device that can be programmed, okay, to carry out set of arithmetic and logical operations. So the parts come down here, the parts that translate instructions and performs calculations. Okay, so whatever program you generate or you write or you develop, as the case may be, what happens is that the microprocessor has to translate that instruction, then perform calculation. That's exactly what the computer does. It's all about calculations and logical operations, if you look at this first definition. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. I make bold to tell you that the computer could also be defined as a calculating device. which we may get to it as well. The programs you write, at the end of the day, some arithmetic and logic operations are done on that program behind the scene. Okay, so let's leave that at that. When we get to the Python programming language, would also throw some light on it again. So here I have software refers to the instructions or programs that tell the hardware what to do. Okay, so the software part of the computer, generally speaking, or is the part of the computer that you can see but you cannot touch. Okay, so we could see that this on this our desktop here, this is my desktop screen. You could see that there is a program running. I can see it but I can't touch it. Okay, so that's the software part of the computer. So just note, building a foundation, note that the computer is made up of majorly two parts: the hardware part of the computer, which is the physical part of the computer you can see, you can touch, and the software part of the computer, which you can only see but you cannot touch, and it's usually made up of what? Instructions. Okay, now let's build on this last aspect, the software, which is where we are driving at now. The software part, or a program or an application, simply put, is a set of instructions. An application is a set of instructions that enables a user to accomplish a specific task. A software or an application or a program enables a user to what? Accomplish a specific task. What do we mean by that? If you want to draw, usually you need to get a drawing board, a T-square, and a pencil, and an A1 paper or a paper. Now, you discover that before the advent of computer, you could draw with that. However, drawing is a specific task, right? Drawing is a specific task. Now, with the advent of computer and programs or application, you discover that with Corel Draw, which is an application, you are now, if you use a Corel Draw application, you are now applying drawing, which is a specific task on the computer. I want us to get the concept of what application is all about, or what a software is all about. Is accomplishing a specific task by a user. If a user wants to draw, instead of using your drawing board, pencil, and T-square and paper, as the case may be, now with computing, it is easier for you to what? Accomplish that task through a software called Corel Draw. Are we understanding what an application is all about, or a software is all about? It enables the user to, it's a set of instructions that enables the user to accomplish a specific task. If you want to prepare your resume, usually you have to have your pen, you have to have your foolscap sheet, and you begin to write, right? Okay, so but resume, it's a specific task, and you discover that if you want to apply that or you want to accomplish that task, there is a software, there is an application that will enable you to apply that task on the computer. That's where the name application comes from. It enables the user to apply a specific task on the computer. Don't forget that the computer's definition, the first one, it says is a general purpose what device. Okay, so you are applying, the computer now is enabling you, the user, to apply the task of drawing using CorelDRAW application. Now the same computer is enabling you to apply what word processing, okay, by generating what is called resume. Okay, now the program that enables you to accomplish that task for you to be able to write your resume or curriculum vitae is known as a word processor. In this context, Microsoft Word. Microsoft is a company that designed a word processing application. The word application is key because that word processing, it gives you the ability to prepare word documents or to process word documents. And that simply means you can use Microsoft Word, which is a word processor, which is a task, to prepare something like a letter. You can use it to prepare something like a resume. You can use it to also prepare anything that has to do with word processing. So that is a specific task. Now, I come down to our local environment, what specific task is all about, so that we understand what programming is all about. Now, if you want to pound anything, what tool do you need in the kitchen? Say you want to pound maybe say pepper, or you want to blend pepper. What do you need to use? Blending pepper is a specific task. Pounding pepper is also what? A specific what? Task. Now you discover that you need a tool, and that tool that you need is what? Mortar and pestle. So mortar and pestle is the application, okay, because that is what you use to what? Accomplish that specific task of blending what? Pepper or grinding pepper. Now there is another version of that tool which could be likened to a program, and that is what? A blender. Okay, one is manual, one is what? Electrical. Okay, so the task there is to what? Blend the pepper. But we have two application methods. It's either you use a mortar and pestle or you use a blender. So we could now see the concept of what? An application. Okay, so the computer being a general purpose device, you could accomplish various tasks on it. All you need to do is to what? Create the application. And in creating the application, you need a programming language to what? To create that application. And that application is simply a set of instructions that enables the user to accomplish that particular task. For instance, the exercise, one of the exercises we looked at in our last video is a tip calculator. A tip calculator is a specific task that enables the user to accomplish what? Tipping amount. That somebody rendered a service to you and you feel like giving the person an extra cash and you want to look at what percentage of the cost of the service the person rendered that you would want to add. Simply, that's what the tip calculator is all about. So if the service the person rendered is 500 naira, for instance, and you want to get a certain percentage of that amount or cost of the service to add to the cost of the service, simply you need an application for that using what? The computer. Okay, and that that task is simply called tipping task. Okay, so if you generate an application to enable the user to, instead of beginning to use biro and paper to calculate, okay, 500 naira, what percentage of 500 naira do I give to this person that has rendered this beautiful service? Okay, now you discover that the clock is ticking. Okay, but with the computer and with that application that would enable the user to accomplish that specific task in record time, is just a few clicks. The task is what is done using what? The computer. Okay, so programming, it's looking or discovering a gap in a process, generating set of instructions to enable the user to fill that gap. That's all about programming. So programming is generating or creating or designing an application to accomplish what? Specific what? Task. It's as simple as that. If you want to add two numbers, that is calculation, which is a task. You generate or you create or you write a program that will enable the user to what? Add two numbers in record time at the speed of light. Not that the human can do it, but because there is no time, the computer will what? Carry out that operation at a very high speed. So that's programming for you. So when you're faced with any programming task, you ask yourself or any programming problem, you ask yourself, what is the task that this program will achieve? Then how do I go about achieving this task? The how is the set of instructions that you need to lay down, that when the computer or the processor follows those steps that you've laid down in your program, irrespective of the programming language, you discover that the task will be what? Met at the end of the day. Okay, but we have different programming language which we use to implement those tasks. For instance, the Microsoft Word processor was designed with a program called Visual Basic. The Microsoft Excel was also designed with programming language called Visual Basic. Right? So we have different programming languages, and one of which we are going to look at is Python. We have C++, we have C, we have C#, we have F#, we have Java, then we have Android, as the case may be. These are different programming languages or platform. No, let me not use the word platform. There are different programming languages that have specific features that meet specific task when you want to achieve a desired result. These different programming languages come up as a result of the previous not being efficient, not being sufficient enough. So there are some things you may want to implement in Visual Basic that you may not be able, but in Python you'll be able to accomplish it. Now Python has what is would now be an improvement, okay, to Visual Basic, as it were. I'm just giving an instance, okay. Now there are some operations, or there are some tasks, or there are some instructions you could generate in Python that Visual Basic may not have, okay. So depending on the task that you want, or that you want to accomplish, you look for the different programming languages that will enable you, the one that would best suit your need or best give you the solution. That's where this concept of different programming languages are around us. Okay, so having laid this foundation, we can now look at some specifics. Now every programming language has its feature, and as a programmer, when you want to learn a particular language, one of the first things I usually do is to get the syntax of the program and the data types of the program. The data types of the program simply is to know what kind of data this programming language support or can manipulate. What kind of data the program would be able to handle, okay? If I could get the data types, then I'm 50% conversant with the programming language. Then if I could get the syntax, I'm 80 to 90% familiar with the programming language. What do I mean? A data type is a category of data that programming language can manipulate. Generally speaking, we have basic data types, okay? I won't go deep, I just mentioned one or two. We have the integer data type, we have the floating data type, depending on the programming language you're looking at. We have the double data type, or we also have classes, as the case may be. Now, these data types, they are they reserve a specific memory location in the computer's memory, and also the type of data they can hold. An integer data type can only hold integers. That simply means any value or numeric value that does not have decimals. For instance, if you say 2.5 The 0.5 is a decimal, okay? It has a floating point. So an integer data type will not hold such a value, okay? The integer data type will only hold the non-decimal part, which is 2, okay? Because if you remember, part of one of the definitions of computing or computer is what? If we go up again, let's just refresh our memory. So it's a general purpose device that can be programmed to carry out set of what? Arithmetic. Okay, so the data type, it's key in every programming language. One of the things you need to learn about that programming language is the data type it supports, because it's all about what the computer does is calculations and logic operations. Okay, so the data type is key. So having the understanding of the kind of data type the programming language supports, that will help you to know how to manipulate what? Data. Programming is all about data manipulation. Add and subtract. That's programming for you. It doesn't go beyond that. Addition and subtraction. Data manipulation. Data structure. Arranging a particular data in a particular way, as the case may be. So the data type is key. Now, if the task you want to accomplish will at the end of the day would involve numbers that have decimal place or decimal parts, for instance the 2.5, then there is a specific data type that would what? Handle that what? Particular value. It helps the processor to know what it's expecting from the user or from the program and how to manipulate that particular data. So an integer data type only holds whole numbers, no decimal place, no fraction. While a float data type or floating point, okay, only holds what? Decimal or decimal numbers. For instance, 2.5 as the case may be, or 35.604 as the case may be. These are floating point numbers. While an integer is 4, 5, 6, 100. Okay, there is no decimal part in an integer. So if you're expecting the user of your program to supply an integer, then you have to what? Create a memory location informing the processor through the data type that what you are expecting from the user to be stored in this memory location is an integer. If you are expecting the user or the processor to manipulate floating points, that's decimal numbers, then you need to instruct the processor to know that this particular memory location is holding floating point. So the processor knows how to manipulate that data which is the floating point, so that you don't have at the end of the day an erroneous answer. Because if you carry out an operation on a floating point and you're declaring that memory location as an integer, you discover that at the end of the operation the result will not be correct, because you have used a wrong data type on a wrong data. So data types are containers that tells the computer to create a specific memory location and the type of content that memory location is expected to hold. For instance, a cup is a container. Giving an analogy what a data type it's all about, further explanation. A cup is a container, right? And a cup could be likened to a memory location on the computer. Now, what are the characteristics or features of a cup? A cup could be square, it could be round in nature. A cup will have what? A handle, right? And it will have a depth. Now, a cup is basically used for what? Holding liquid. Water, Coke, Fanta, right? Now, Coke and Fanta is the what? The content that the cup is supposed to hold. Okay? Coke in this instance in programming is the data, while the cup is what? The data what? Type. Okay? You would hardly see somebody use a cup to hold what? Soup. There is a particular data type, or there is a particular container for what? Soup. Soup is the data. The container that carries the soup is what? The data type. I hope we are getting the concept of what data type is. Data type is all about. Now, the data type enables the processor to know what is contained in that what? Memory location. Immediately you see a cup, you know what the cup is expected to what? Hold. The content of the cup. Usually it should be what? Liquid. Okay? So that is what data types is all about. And another thing about data type is, depending on each data type has a specific amount of memory that is reserved for it. Okay, I give you an instance here. This is how the computer memory is like. Now, once you know the kind of data you will be working with in your program, then you know the kind of data type the kind of variable you declare. Now, what is a variable? A variable is a temporary memory location reserved by or created by the programmer with respect to the data that is required or that is expected or that will be manipulated by the processor when issued or at runtime when received by the user input. As the name is, I'll go back to the analogy of a cup. We have different sizes of cup, right? Now, and different types of cup. Now, a teacup has limitation in size, but a mug or a jug, they both hold what? Liquids. A teacup and a jug, they hold what? Liquid, but you discover that their sizes are what? Different. Okay, so the data type of type integer and the data type of type float their memory locations or reservation will be what? Different. Okay? Are we together? When you declare a variable as a float, there is a certain amount of memory that is reserved for what? That variable. When you declare a variable, or you instantiate, or no, you create a variable in your programming, in your programming language, there is a specific memory location that is reserved for what? That variable. A variable, as the name implies, is it holds something, or it holds a content that changes from time to time, so it varies. That's what a variable is all about in programming language. Creating a memory location that will hold value that what? Changes from time to time. Okay, now I go back to the teacup analogy and the jug. You discover that the jug can hold the content of a teacup to each brim. The teacup, if you pour a liquid into a teacup to the brim, you discover that the teacup is full. Now, the content of that teacup to its fullness, you could empty it in a jug, and there will still be what? Space to take in more what? Liquid. Okay, so the teacup also has its own what? Limitations. If you pour a small amount of what? Liquid in the teacup, it will take as much as the depth of what? The teacup. So you discover that a variable can hold small, medium, and largest, which is the depth of the what? Either the teacup or the jug. So the jug can hold more or various what? Content of liquid to its brim. The concept there is the content of the jug varies from small to medium to fullest. You can empty the content of a teacup into a jug, and the jug will be able to what? Carry it, because the memory location or the depth or the size of the teacup is of the mug is far greater than the size of what? The teacup. So that is the data type we are talking about in terms of size and the kind of data they can hold. Okay, and the kind of data they can hold vary. Okay, a variable is simply, like I said, a memory location that holds value that change from time to time in the course of the programming runtime. So usually what happens is that for the processor to carry out any instruction, there must be a reserved memory location where the data that has to be manipulated will be stored, because the processor fetches instruction from where? The memory. Okay, so as a practice is, the programmer is expected to create what? Memory locations where the values that he expects the processor to manipulate will be stored. And that is not enough. It has to tell the processor the kind of values that it will be working on. Okay, so if it's expecting, if you declare a memory location as a string, and you want to impute or you want to store an integer there in that memory location, the programming language will generate what is called an error. Now that brings us to what is known as syntax. Okay, syntax error, or syntax rather, is the format you need to abide by, the rule of that language. Okay, so if you create a data type that is supposed to hold integer, you create a variable rather that you declare a variable as an integer, okay, and you want to store a string in it, the programming language will generate an error informing you that no, this variable that you declared of type integer is supposed to hold whole numbers. Okay, so the data type is key when you want to learn a programming language for the first time. You need to know the data type, and the basic data types we have the integer, we have the float, we have the string, and other kinds of data type. The string data type holds strings. It holds both numbers, special characters, and letters put together, but it must be in a quote, because that's what the syntax it's all about. So the syntax enables guides the programmer to know what is acceptable in a particular programming language. That's syntax rule. Okay, in English language, which we know that we have what is called parts of speech. Now we have verb, we have adjective, okay, we had adverb, as the case may be. Now that parts of speech, if you want to form a sentence in English language, there is a rule, there is a syntax for forming a sentence in English language. And that rule is a sentence must have what? A subject and what? A predicate. That is a syntax. That is the rule. So also in programming language, if you want to declare a variable, there is what is called a syntax in creating or declaring that variable, and usually it comes in this format. For instance, I could say I want to perform okay, so for instance, I want to create a variable. Creating a variable is a memory location that is going to hold an integer. I can say num1, okay, is assigned 4. Now in Python, this is allowed. Okay, this is the rule to create a variable. And when you create a variable which is num1, creating this num1 is a memory location on the system. Okay, if we go back to our word form here, okay, for instance, the memory location is this, and I have just created a place called num1. I have reserved a location on the memory of the computer called what? Num1. So each time the processor wants to access what is in what the content of num1, it has to refer to this name called what? Num1. And num1 is a variable, is that holds the content, that the content it holds could vary. Okay, so this is acceptable. This is the syntax. Okay, variable name for short. If we are to type the syntax of the syntax will be variable name assign variable value. Okay, so this will be the syntax. Syntax is simply the rule to create or reserve or memory location. Okay, so if you look at that example there, I said num1 is assigned what? 5. Okay, so once the computer wants to execute, what will be contained here will be what? 5. Are we together? So anywhere the computer encounters this variable name called num1, it's going to retrieve what? 5. That's what this statement means in Python. Okay, now in course of execution, you could come down and also say num1 is equal 5. Is assigned, not equal, is assigned 5 plus 1. Okay, this value here would change to what? 6. Okay, so you see the concept of variable. Whatever is contained in this memory location that has the name num1 varies, it changes. That's why it's called a variable. Okay, but the rule to reserve or to create a variable by the syntax of creating a variable in Python is so we could see that the content in num1 changes. That's why it is referred to as what? A variable. Okay, so let's implement this now. If we pick out this, sorry, say num1. Okay, if we run this, come to the bottom of our screen here, and let's see the result. Okay, so we could see here that the content is what? 4. Okay, then if we come down here, and we say num1 is assigned 4 plus 1. Now at runtime, the value 4 will be assigned to num1. Then this line will execute. The next line of this code will execute. Now num1 will now take a new value, which is 4 plus 1. Okay, and what we have there, 4 plus 1, 4 plus 1, we'll now have the new value would be 5. Okay, so let's go. Okay, you see, we at the first instance when num1 was created, a value 4 was assigned to it. Then the second line of execution, okay, now we discover that 4 plus 1, now num1 now takes the new value, which is what? 5. So the content of whatever is in num1 varies. That's where the name variable comes in. Are we together? Okay, so we could see that variables that are created are supposed to hold different values, as the case may be. We were talking about syntax. Now we could also see that in Python the syntax is the variable name, and the value. This is the variable name num1, which is this memory location here, okay, and the value. What is the value? 5, with this assignment statement. Okay, so this equal sign you're seeing in programming language is called assignment statement. So this is the syntax for creating or declaring a variable in syntax. However, this is particular to Python. However, if we look at C#, okay, this is my Visual Studio. If we look at C#, okay, let's look at the syntax. Let's look at the syntax. The syntax in Visual in C++ programming, C# programming language rather. Okay, so I'll just go. I want us to see something there. Look at the various. We don't need to bother ourselves with all this. I would have showed you a program, but I would want to create it from the very beginning, so we'll flow together. So let's give it a little time. Come back. So okay, it's up now. Now this is the C# coding environment. So in Python we did something like this. num1 is assigned 5, right, or 4, as the case may be. Okay, now we could see that different programming language has different syntax. Now we could see that this is not acceptable in C. It's saying the name num1 does not exist in this context. Okay, but this is permissible in Python because of this syntax that we saw here, okay, which is this. Now in C# language, the syntax for creating a value or a variable, it's data type, variable name, variable name, assignment operator, variable value. So if we were to break this down, we discover that data type data type, when we talk about data type, we are looking at integer, int, float, string, boolean, double. Let me leave it at that. Okay, these are data types. Okay, then the next thing is variable name. Variable name, we are looking at num1. Okay, then the next thing is assignment operator. Assignment operator is this. Okay, the next thing is variable value, which we assigned 5. Okay, so I've been able to break down. Okay, so I've been able to break it down here. So the syntax for Python, let me put it here, Python. You see here it's variable name, assignment operator, variable value. So variable name is num1, assignment operator is equal to here, then variable value we have 5 or 5 plus 1 as the case may be. Then if we go to C#, we have the syntax is data type, variable name, assignment operator, variable value. Okay, so data type is int, float, string, or boolean as the case may be. The variable name is num1, assignment operator is equal here, then variable value is 5. Now if we go back to this, now we discover that the syntax for C# is different from the syntax for Python, right? This syntax is applicable to Python but not applicable to C#. Okay, so with that I'm supposed to add that is end of statement operator. This. Okay, so what we need to do is to introduce the keyword data type int, variable name num1, variable value 4 or 5, then this. Okay, so we now see that we don't have any red line across any. If I omit the semicolon, which you discover that there is a red line. So if I add this makes a full statement in C#. Okay, so any programmer that picks up your code or your program will know that the variable name that you declared num1 is of type what? Integer, and is holding the value what? 5. Now this is different from Python. You see the syntax here now. You see the rule for creating declaring or creating a variable and assigning a value to it. you could as well do this int num1 semicolon. Okay, then you come down here, you take off the keyword int, you take off the keyword. So num1 as it were now, it's a variable that is declared as type what? Integer. So we can come down here and say num1, okay, is assigned the value what? 5. Okay, and we put that, and let's see what we have there. Okay, that num1 does not exist. Could also do this, is acceptable. Okay, so now this in Python has improved. Now if in C#, if you fail to do this, the program will always generate an error, or the IDE will always generate an error. But in Python, you discover that this is allowed. Okay, so there is an improvement in Python. Okay, now we could, if we want to, if we want to know what data type this variable num1 is, then we introduce what a particular function. Okay, num1. Okay, then we say num1. Okay, so I'll take off this print statement here, then I'll run. Now let me tell you what this is all about. Now this is a print function. The print function is taking 3 arguments: num1, a string, and another function that takes 1 argument. The function type, okay, is going to return the data type of num1. Let's run it and we'll see what the result is. Okay, so we could see here now that the statement has printed 4 is of type what? Class int. Are you seeing this type function here? Okay, is of class is this string you're seeing here. The string is of type, sorry, is of type is this string, is the string here, which is of type. Then num1, which is the variable, okay, is holding what? 4. Okay, so it's 4 is of type class what? Int. Now if I change this, if I do this, this is one way to know the variable, the data type that a variable is holding. Okay, that's, if I do this, num2 is assigned 5.8. okay, and I repeat the same statement here. And I change this to num2, change this to num2. Okay, I'll save this and I print. Okay, are we seeing that 5.8 is of type class what? Float. Okay, so 5.8 is a floating point. Num2, it's a variable that is of type float. In C++, in C#, this would have been, the syntax would have been this and this. Okay, this is still acceptable. Okay, however, you can, it's not a must, it's not mandatory that you need to add the keywords there. So you could see the flexibility in Python as compared to C#, that you need, it is required of you to add this keyword int in front of the variable name, okay, and the assignment statement as the case may be. So if we also do this, say name is assigned this Martin. Okay, so we don't know what this variable type is, so we want to find out what data type this variable name is going to hold. We've been able to find out the data type that the variable num1 is holding. We've also been able to find out the data type that the variable num2 is holding, and it's declared as. So we'll do same for this last one, and we'll see what we have there. We change this to name, we change this one to name as well. I'll save and I'll run. We'll come down here. Okay, this is our solution here. So we have 4 is of type int, 5.8 is of type what, float, then Martin is of type what, string. Okay, so another way to do this, we could say int num1, say float num2, then we say str. Str is the keyword for string data type. Okay, and it is still acceptable. Now you discover that in Python you don't need to add the semicolon, it will still accept it. Okay, with or without the semicolon, it will still what, accept. The IDE will not generate error. But if we go to C# and we don't add this semicolon, we discover that it will throw an error. Okay, so that is all about syntax. Syntax is key. Once you know the data type in a programming language, the next thing I usually look out for is the syntax rules to create a statement, rules to create a valid statement or expression in that particular programming language. So we could see that in Python there is flexibility. Now it was because of this constraint of adding this semicolon in C# that may have also given rise to Python, because in Python now you have the flexibility of either adding the semicolon or leaving it out, and it will still, let's check it out and see what we have there. Here we have we don't have semicolon, here we have semicolon. Let's see what it's there for us. Okay, so we are now seeing here now that we're having this syntax error, invalid syntax. Okay, so look at the line here. Okay, so let's take off this, let's take off this, let's take off this, and let's take off this, let's take off this, let's take off this. Let's see what we have there. Okay, so we've already declared this initially, so let's put this int float str. Let's see what we have here. Okay, so we are seeing here int num1 say invalid. So we are in Python, the syntax there is just variable name and the value, and we should still be able to get what the result. So it's in Python we don't need to add the data type. When we supply the data value, the IDE or the Python has the ability to determine based on the value that is assigned to the variable name or the variable to detect which data type that variable is of. I hope that is clear enough. So it's key for us to understand the syntax, which is the rule in creating a valid statement in a particular language. Having known the data type, next thing is to know how to form a valid statement in that particular programming language. Okay, and another thing you need to look out for is how to create a variable name, which is almost conventional. There are some certain rules you need to abide. A variable name might not start with some. Let's look at this little note I did here. Now, a variable name or an identifier, if we look at this place here, say Python language has specific rules, some rules for identifier. Identifier is also a variable name, that is names given to variables, functions, class, modules, etc. These rules are as follow. An identifier must not start with an alphabet, must start with an alphabet. An identifier cannot start with a digit. Okay, that simply means that with an alphabet or a letter, which is this N, okay, the second one says it cannot start with a digit. That simply means you cannot have something like this. You cannot say 5 num 4. Okay, if we do that from that rule there, we are going to see an error. We don't even need to run the code at all. See, invalid, we could see here, this red line is saying code analysis, invalid syntax. Okay, are we seeing it? Invalid syntax. So the rule for creating an identifier or a variable name is that it can start with any English alphabet letter. It cannot start with a digit. An identifier must not contain a space or a comma. Okay, let's verify that. It must not contain a space or a comma. So we've discovered that this one is invalid. Say a space or a comma. Let's see this, and let me take off this one and let's see what we have there. Okay, so if we so we put what's the say an identifier must not contain a space or a comma or even a dot. Okay, so let's look at what we have there. We did this, and here we could see that let me add that again, and let's save this and see. Let's run. Okay, so we could see the error here now. Say num n comma um2 is a cannot unpack non-iterable float object. So we could see type error there. Okay, so you avoid something like this. Okay, what's the next one there? A multi-word identifier can be separated by an underscore. Okay, so what that means is I can have this. Let's correct this ones. Let's correct this ones. These are basic things that we need to know. They are fundamentals in programming. If I say num1 underscore, if I want to have two words, say num1 Martin. Okay, this is a two word. I can separate this with say with an underscore. So this is allowed. Okay, so if you this is allowed in Python in creating an identifier or a variable name. What's the next one again? An identifier could be a mix of lowercase a to z, uppercase a to z, alphabet, digits 0 to 9, or an underscore. Okay, so I can have this one. I can also have something like this, Martin, or all caps Martin. That's what it's saying. Okay, in forming the identifier or a variable name, as the case may be. Okay, I can even add 9 to it. It's still a valid identifier or a variable name. So if I replace this with num2, then I take this and replace it with this. Okay, you discover that these red dots will all leave. Okay, so we could see. So this is also key, knowing how to form a valid identifier in or variable name in Python. So we have an identifier could be of any length. Okay, it could be 20 characters, could be 5 characters, could be 1 letter, as the case may be. Okay, so an identifier cannot contain special characters like hash, hash, at, ampersand, and percentage. So let's look at this. Let's look at practical example. If say it cannot contain the at sign, okay, so let's see what error will be generated there. These are practicals. We don't need to just say it. So immediately I added this at. Now I'm having this red sign here, and it's telling me what cannot assign an operator. Okay, so another thing that the instruction there says to forming a valid identifier or variable name is hash sign. If you form an identifier or variable name with hash sign, it will trigger as invalid. Okay, so if I remove this at sign here, we could see that there is a red mark here. Okay, you see the hash sign has made TIN9 to be grayed out completely. Okay, another thing there is say it should not have what again? It should not have percentage sign. Okay, so if I take off this sign here and I replace it with a percentage sign, these are practicals. We don't mouth it. Okay, so you're seeing the red dot there. So if you're forming an identifier or variable names, you are not supposed to use any of these characters. That's why I'm taking my time to display them one after the other. Okay, then another thing is that Python is case sensitive. It's a case sensitive language, hence identifiers such as name is different from what name. That simply means that if I declare an identifier, or I create an identifier as name, which hold Martin, and I create another identifier as name, which holds Iso. Okay, what that is saying is this word name is different from this one. Okay, even if I change it to first, it's still what different, as it were. Okay, so the interpreter will see name as holding a different value, and will see this other name as holding a different value, despite the fact that the content may be the same. Okay, so, or the content may be different. Okay, so if you reference name here, the interpreter rather, would see this identifier or variable name as different from this. Okay, even if they are holding the same value. Okay, that is what this other part is saying. Python is case sensitive. Okay, Python keywords, that is reserved words. Your identifier that you're creating should not carry any of these: false, class, none, continue, true, del, and def. Okay, these are reserved words in Python that your identifier should not be. So I cannot declare a variable or an identifier as none. Okay, see the red line there? If I say none is a sign 7. Let's look at that keyword again, those keywords again. None. Okay, it's capital N. Go to do this. Okay, so you see that it's a keyword. It has the same color with the word print. Okay, so you cannot use none as an identifier. So that's what this means. You cannot also use this keyword continue as an identifier. So that is another thing you need to look out for. You see, you cannot use it as an identifier. So knowing the data type, knowing the syntax, also knowing the reserved words that you will not be able to use as an identifier, and knowing the rules in creating an identifier. It's also key in learning a programming language. Any programming language, the concepts are the same. Okay, so keywords are very important. Note those keywords and try as much as possible not to fall prey in using them. However, if you're using an IDE, okay, like this one we're using here, the IDE will be able to prompt you or call your attention that, hey, that keyword, that this word, this variable that you just created is a reserved word or a keyword in Python or in any program, in that particular programming language, and you are not allowed to use it. Why? Because it has a specific function or meaning to that programming language, you are not meant to use it. The interpreter or the compiler will call your attention to it. Okay, so I'm going to do another video on the remaining parts of this Python study, because this video is over an hour. So I'm going to do another video to continue. So watch out for the second part of our study video on Python.